Hello, my name's Toby Thompson. I'm with Shaun Tyson, Emeritus Professor of Human Resource Management. Shaun, you were the supervisor for Gabriel Morelli, a student a while back. Tell us, how was that process on the panel and as a supervisor for GABS?
Well, it was very much the process which we adopt for most of our DBAs. That is, a panel came together which had some subject expertise in the area, but also people who had an interest in the method that GABS, as we used to call him, was adopting. And it also, of course, had his supervisor, Ashley Braganza, who was the person who I think GABS had actually got an affinity with to begin with, and decided to do the DBA here partly on that basis.
So was your memory that GABS came to that session, that DBA, with a fully formed idea for what he wanted to do, or did it emerge through that process, panel process?
He had a broad idea. I think this is again not uncommon amongst DBA students, and indeed PhD students for that matter, that they come typically with a very broad idea of the area they want to research, sometimes a very specific topic which they then broaden out when they realise that it's not going to lead to a doctorate. In the case of GABS, he came with a view of the sales force, of which he was a sales manager in the pharmaceutical industry, which he had formed over many years concerning the way in which objective setting and sales force planning was conducted. And when we first saw this topic, it seemed rather a dull one, quite frankly, and it looked at first as though there was not going to be very much in it. It looked very much a practical and rather sort of systematic issue which you could very quickly deal with. However, of course, once we got into it, and once he got into it, and began to explore all the intricacies of how sales force planning is related to territory planning for sales forces, then it became much more interesting and exciting. And I realised, and indeed I think all the panel began to realise, that within this topic there was actually very much a DBA and something which was exciting and interesting and which would lead to a real contribution.
But you must have seen an HRM angle on it too, and you've been excited to carry on that discussion with him.
Yes, there was an HR angle, which was the angle really around objective setting and how you actually link the objectives to the area of work that people are going to concentrate on, and how that gets linked back into the planning of the numbers of people. I mean, sales planning is slightly more complex and in some ways more interesting than other aspects of HR planning, because one of the things which GABS got into was how do you decide what would constitute a territory, for example. Who decides and how is it decided that this particular area will be a sales territory, bearing in mind that the rewards for sales personnel are often based upon their output, that is their sales in that particular territory. And of course in each territory there are varying numbers of customers, there are different kinds of customers, some customers who might be more likely to buy your product than others. So the issue about the setting up of the territory in itself is a more complex process than one might imagine.
So that's an academic topic too, because I guess you could say that it's such a pragmatic, work-oriented thing that you're almost doing his work for him, or he's doing his work on a DBA. But I guess he is. It's not a reason not to do a DBA.
No, indeed. But there is an academic content to it as well, because we get into the issue of how you construct socially the concept of a sales territory. So what constitutes an appropriate sales territory is a social construct. It's something which is negotiated between the sales director, the sales individuals themselves, and an individual whose territory it is going to be. And of course, to some extent, even it could be the customers who may want to have a particular salesperson to deal with, and they themselves might have some say in the process. If you add into this mix the fact that very often, and this is, I think, the case in some of those territories that we're looking at here, the case that there are certain customers who will go typically to say the sales manager or sales director because of the volume of sales rather than actually being dealt with by the sales person themselves. So you get all these different elements coming into the negotiation as to how many sales territories there should be, how many sales staff there should be, and what constitutes a sales territory. So that in itself was just the first part of his DBA, but in itself it obviously offered opportunities, because if you take a sort of social constructionist perspective, you can begin to see other things besides just the rather mundane issue of how you divide up the number of customers between sales staff.
So addition to the territoriality, literature and discourse for sales forces.
Yes.
Shaun Tyson, thank you very much indeed for your time.